That's stuff you're looking for there. What can I find? Is there like an old? Did they leave an old version of some? A lot of weird things happen where people get into development and then they forget to take something down. That happens pretty regularly. So it's tedious, but you got to look through it. Also, during scanning, you can use Metasploit, which is also one of the main tools you'll use during exploitation. But they do have a lot of auxiliary scanners that you can do port scans and different kind of vulnerability scans right from Metasploit as well. So that's another tool you can use if you want to. Exploitation, probably the funnest part of this entire thing. This is where you actually break into the computer and try and get a foothold in the network. Yes. 10 minutes, thank you. Oh, all right, I'm faster than I thought. Okay, so this is where like I said, this is where you're going to take all the information you've gathered up to this point from reconnaissance and scanning, and you're going to put that to work so that you can actually get into the system. A lot of times it's going to come through like, if you see something like port 80, port 443, those are two ports you really want to focus on because it's low-hanging fruit. It's easy to break. It's easy to get into. A lot of times SSH is open on the network. It's usually best to steer clear of that because it's really hard to get into and it's really hard to break. You can always just do like quick brute force attacks on it, see if maybe they're using a root, admin. Somebody just set something and didn't put a lot of thought behind it, but that doesn't happen often, and you end up wasting a lot of time on something you're probably not going to get into. So, like I said, you want to look for the services that you know are easy to break: HTTP, HTTPS, SMB. If you can see, if they see that BIOS, that's always a good sign. A quick way to get in. And when you're looking at exploitation, some of the tools you're going to use are Metasploit, which is just an entire framework that has a lot of exploits built into it, as MS Venom, so you can kind of build some payloads in there as well for post-exploitation. You can also use SearchSploit or ExploitDB. ExploitDB is easy. You go to the web, you put in exactly what you're looking for, it tells you what it is, and you go from there. You can use SearchSploit from your command line as well if you like to work from the command line. Chances are, if you're doing this, you're spending a lot of time in the command line anyway, and it's a lot easier to just pull your information that way and download it directly from the terminal. And we have our post-exploitation part. This is where we get the goodies. So once you've found what you want to exploit and you get into the system, now you want to start looking for the good stuff. You want to try and get passwords, things like that. So, like I said, we're going to want to use tools like Mimikatz, which is going to enumerate an Active Directory environment. It'll dump you'll be able to start dumping all the hashes. If people haven't logged out of their computer, which I'm sure lots of people know, people tend to log out of their work computers very often. So anybody who else is logged in all those passwords get stored. You get to dump all those hashes and then run tools like Hashcat to crack those passwords, which usually works every time. Nobody has a password that's not in a word list. It's almost 100% guaranteed that once you get those hashes, you're going to get a clear text password out of it. And there's some other tricks you can do. Like as you start to use those tools, you kind of learn other ways to get passwords and move throughout the network. You can pass the hash, you can steal tickets, there's Kerber roasting, things like that, where you can exploit the inner workings of Microsoft to make it do what you want it to. Like I said, the main part of that is just you want to get those passwords so that you can maintain persistence in their network. And finally, there's reporting. It's time consuming. It's probably about 50% of what your engagement's going to be reporting. Once you get in, you have to document everything you did, make sure that the client knows exactly what it is you did, how you did it, what your recommendations are for the future so that they can block that. A lot of times there's services that are turned on. You want to be able to tell them, I exploited this service, you can turn this service off, it won't affect your network in any way. And that's what they're paying for, really, at the end of the day. If they're not paying for you to break in the computer, they're paying for that report. So that is it. Anyone have any questions? Because I got through that super fast. ExploitDB. And you just go to Google, type in ExploitDB. It's run by a Google now owns that. So, depending on how you feel about Google, you may or may not want to go there. But yeah, no, they maintain an entire repository on all the active proof of concept. Then you can see the proof of concept from there as well. They offer the source code to all the exploits, so definitely serves a good purpose.
So tools for recording what you're doing so that it's easier to put that report together at the end so you don't forget things.
Well, there's like Faraday. If you run Faraday and you have that connected to like your central server, you can run Nmap through Faraday. There's a lot. It has a ton of plugins that you can run through, and that will record everything for you. Kali 2020 comes with a desktop recorder now, so you can also record the exploits as you're doing them. And that's something you can even offer to the client if you want. If you want to do it, just so they can see like this is how quick it happened. like this is how easy things happen once like that vulnerability gets found. But yeah, Faraday's probably the best way to go. Even the free version, there's still a lot of plugins that work. I think you lose some of the reporting functionality if you don't pay for it, but from a note-taking standpoint, it does a pretty good job of it. I use OneNote and Cherry Tree a lot for note-taking purposes, just because Cherry Tree ships with Kali and it's really good. It keeps everything in like a directory kind of setup, so it's easy to keep your notes organized as you're going. And you can kind of go back on those and see like, I saw these things, this is what I saw, this is what I started going after when I saw it, this is why I went after it. Because they want to know those things. They just want to kind of get an idea of what you're looking for so that they can get a little bit of an idea of like what an attacker mindset looks like as well, so that they can start to plan things out a little bit better inside their network as they're starting to secure it more. A lot of times they already know there's problems and they're just kind of hoping you don't find them. So.
Very good.
All right.
Well, thank you, sir.
We are done.
You want to go next? You can go next. Next on the chopping block. Do you need a dongle? Oh, look, you brought your own dongle. Okay. Sure. Hey, Joel, we have a question from an online viewer. What is a good way to practice the methodology?
Hack the Box has tons of vulnerable machines. VulnHub has tons of vulnerable machines. So those are probably Hack the Box is honestly probably the best place to go because they have a wide range of scenarios, and you can enumerate all the boxes at one time on Hack the Box if you really want to. You can just run Nmap against the entire network range, and you'll hit every box they have.
Pentester Academy is also really great. I love theirs. I think they have like over 4,000. It does cost money, and they don't pay me, but it's worth it. You want over 4,000 different sandbox machines to hit. They're great for that.
Now, quick question on that. Is it true that VulnHub don't still do walkthroughs while it's active? Because I know what Hack the Box, they only do walkthroughs after they retire the box.
I believe VulnHub would let you do walkthrough before.
I'm just thinking from a learning perspective.
VulnHub is community-based, so anyone can potentially upload.
Okay, that's
They
what I
don't
thought.
have
You-
any explicit rules against it, so if someone figures it out, they can.
I'm just
do it.
thinking from a learning perspective, being able to walk through and why you can have it.
You also have to have quite a good bit of trust in the boxes that they put up there.
Yeah, don't do it on your active machine. Do it on your test machine.
Yeah.
I just paid it.
He's like, oh, what?
All right, up next we have Miss Rae Baker.
All right, exploring personal branding for security professionals. I know this is everybody's favorite topic. listen to me. Before I started in open source intelligence, I worked as a graphic designer for 15 years. So I worked in branding and marketing. So I got to learn a lot about branding, clients, personal branding, and clients. So this is not to brag, but in a year since I started in security, in a year, this is what I've gotten from branding myself online. 2 internships. This is only 4 semesters into school. So I've been on 2 podcast episodes. I'm on the advisory board for OSINT Curious. If you follow OSINT stuff, that's cool. I've done multiple conference talks. I had several job offers. Cool network of friends. And my dream job, most recently. So what is personal branding? It's marketing yourself. Mostly for us it'd be online. Who you are, what you know, like what is your expertise, and why does anybody care? These are 2 examples of people on Twitter that I think do a good job at personal branding. If you are in IT, networking, security, any of that, and you don't have a Twitter account, you're missing. There's a huge group of people that help you, and a lot of what I have received, the help I've received, has come from Twitter. InfoSec Sherpa, she's actually from Philly. She does a good job with, her thing is, she used to work in a library, so she does open source intelligence, but it's a lot of like special places to find documents, and that's kind of her thing. Daniel Meisler, he does a podcast. He also does a newsletter that's really cool. He has a logo. He brands himself really well. So why is it necessary for you to put in the time to brand yourself online? First, you need to show people you exist, because online you don't really exist until you repeatedly put out content, and then people will know you're there. You need to display that you actually know things. You could be in school forever and think you're an expert, but online nobody knows who you are. And the networking online is invaluable. You can find opportunities. I've been offered internships and jobs just through talking to people on Twitter. Here are 2 more that show good branding. Joe Gray, he does a lot of tutorials, teaching. Like you can sign up for his classes, and that's his thing. He constantly pitches them online. Ian Coldwater, that thing is nice. So how do you start branding yourself? First, you have to decide who you are and who you want to be. So you need a voice. What do you want people to know about you or see you as? Do you want to be the best hacker? Do you want to be great at open source intelligence? You have to decide that up front so you can start like catering your personality online to that. And what your end goal is. Like, do you just want a job? Do you want an internship? Do you want to network and be known or talk at conferences? So you have to start thinking about what your place in that is, because there are tons of hackers. There's tons of people online. So what is your specialty? And then be strategic. Like I said, Twitter, I would probably focus mainly on Twitter and LinkedIn. And LinkedIn is it's not that fun. And be strategic with your friendships on there too. I wouldn't just friend everyone to try and have like a huge network of people. Like I personally will only add people if I think that they will add value to my career or my school or myself as a person. Because you can clutter your feed up with a bunch of stuff that won't help you. Sorry. Okay.
Should be.
And then I follow a 60-40 content rule, so I don't take information. How close should I hold it?
Okay.
Is that good? All right. So I don't consume more information than I put out. I try to consume some and then put out more. Like I'll read a bunch of blogs, but then I'll write a bunch, so that people feel like they're getting something from me. I'm not just friends with them to be friends with them. They're learning something from me or following what I do. So this would be an example. So Carl has decided he wants to be an OSINT expert. He wants to be seen as a professional, but down to earth, and be considered an authority on open source intelligence. He wants to stay open so that people feel comfortable coming to him, and he's going to use blogs and online training to do that, which is kind of a standard thing. I think most people write blogs, and once they learn enough, they start doing online trainings. I will only friend people on Twitter and LinkedIn who I feel contribute to my life. That's pretty much what I do. I don't know anybody else, but it's fun for me. So then the next step is maintaining this. Once you decide who you are, you have to stick to it. Like how you respond to things. When you go to conferences, what are you talking about? Is it on brand? It sounds lame, but it's your brand. People know what they're getting when they come to you or when they sign up for a talk or something. They know who you are going to be and what you're going to talk about. Try and be real, but don't be a jerk. You can be your own personality without being a jerk to everybody. And definitely contribute, because if you don't give and take, you're just there. You're not. You want to give back to the community that you're taking from, and feed the content machine. So that's the big thing with online personalities is you have to blog, you have to talk, you have to volunteer, you have to stay relevant. Try to say yes to things. If people offer for you to give a 15-minute writing talk, say yes. Do what scares you. I've been trying to do this. I say all year rather than months, but I've been trying to do this for a few months now and just do everything that terrifies me, and it's worked out pretty well. Set content goals. So like I try to write a blog like once a month, or I will dump things into a blog throughout the week, and then at the end of the week I'll write it. Staying relevant is a huge thing with social media. So if you are into blogging and that's what you want to do, I would recommend it because it makes you appear as an expert to people on social media and at companies. Don't be intimidated. That's a huge thing I hear all the time is people don't know where to start. Even if you're doing the same thing as somebody else, you have a unique perspective. So people will want to read it. And there's always somebody who knows less than you. So even if you've only been doing this for a month or 2 months, there's somebody who's just been doing it for a few weeks and they want to hear what you have to say. If you're looking for topics for blogs, Quora. I use that. You can go and you can type like open source intelligence or whatever, and it'll show you what other people are asking about, the questions that they're asking, and then you know what to write about because they'll want to see it. And like I said, just start dumping things in a blog. If you come across an idea anywhere, just throw it in a blog and maybe go back to it in a week and start writing about it. And networking is huge. When you go to conferences, talk to people. Go to conferences, first of all. Talk to people online, on Twitter, make friends, connect with people, because if you don't, your branding isn't really for any reason. You're not going to go anywhere. I think that's all I had. But I say I have my dream job. like I talk that quick.
Oh, I have a question, just to ask one.
Yeah.
So if you're gonna brand yourself online, what platforms do you think are relevant? I'm assuming Twitter's probably very relevant platform to use.
For me, it was Twitter and LinkedIn. I was gonna give you that. It was Twitter and LinkedIn because Twitter, there's just so many tech people there that you're great with the people you need to be. LinkedIn is kind of like a follow-up. I would copy everything you do from your blog to Twitter and LinkedIn. Just like cover the bases.
Use Medium for a few posts?
I do.
MySpace.
I use Medium, but it's probably better to host it on your own site and then you get the traffic.
I'll keep time for you too. Thank you, Ray.
Do you have the password handy? If not, I wrote it down.
Yes,
I
I
found out I
do.
forgot my charger, so.
There you go.
Mike, you give you countdown, or you pretty good?
I'm taken care of. Thank you, though. Because I expect I'll actually need it.
Bless you.
This is the Emacs talk, Mike?
Yep, the Emacs talk.
That dirty four-letter word.
Mike does not use Emacs.
Leaf pad or die.
Sorry for the delay here in getting set up. I found out that I forgot.
Good.
We good?
Yep.
Okay.
All right. Mike Salvatore.
I don't know why this bar is at the top, but Firefox isn't cooperating, and I'm not really going to use the slides all that much anyway. So for those of you who know me, you'll know that I hate typing. I think it sucks. In fact, this is the second presentation I've given for PA hackers that ends in because typing sucks. I type something like 100 words a minute, which is not like blazing super fast, but like I like to think it's pretty quick, and I still think that typing is slow, and I need to do everything I can to do less of it on a daily basis. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Mike Salvatore. I'm lone wolf on the PA Hacker Slack. I work for Canonical on the Ubuntu security team. Here's my contact information. These slides, I think, will be up later, so I'm not going to spend too much time on them. So what is Vim? I imagine that probably everybody in here has come across it. If you've used Linux for more than an hour or two, you've probably seen Vim or VI. And a lot of people, Vim is really hard. Like, I don't get it. What's going on? And I think it's because the way that we generally teach people Vim is wrong, and that can be for a few reasons. One is that usually your first introduction to it, you're not trying to learn how to use it. You're trying to do something else. Right, so somebody's like, oh yeah, you hit I, and then you can type whatever you want, and then you hit escape, and here's how you save your work. And you're like, well, what if I don't hit I first? And they're like, horrible things will happen, and you'll be totally confused, and you'll have to just like quit out and open it back up and start over. And you're like, oh, okay, that's Vim, that's great. But that's like not really what's going on there. So tonight, I'm going to talk about Vim. It's a text editor. But it's more than that. Some people have said, like, oh, Vim is a language, and it is. It has, like, subjects and verbs and things like that. But for me, it's more like, if you're familiar with Ray Kurzweil, he's a futurist. He's, like, director of engineering at Google or something. And he has this concept of the singularity, which is that the machines aren't going to rise up and kill us. Instead, we're going to kind of merge with the machines. We're going to use the machines to augment ourselves. So by the time that the machines are ready to rise up and kill us, they won't, because we are the machines. We've become a single thing. It's the singularity. So for me, Vim is a little bit more like that. It's like this magical tool that when you learn how to use it, all of a sudden you get to type way less and like things just magically happen without you really having to think so much about it. It does have a pretty steep learning curve though. I don't know if anybody's seen this graphic before. It's meant to be a joke, but it's pretty accurate, right? Like Notepad we're all familiar with, like you just type, there's really not that much to learn. Vim or VI, like the first time you use it, it's like a brick wall. You're like, I have no idea what's going on with this. And there's like this huge hump to get over. We're not going to do Emacs versus Vim tonight, but this is actually also really accurate. You know, it has like a normal learning curve, but then you end up like spiraling off into the abyss, doing things that like aren't really helpful or useful as far as editing text. So the important thing that I think to understand, I'm going to kind of blow through probably a lot of material quick because I've only got 15 minutes. I'm not going to try and show you like all the cool Vim features, and don't want you to walk out of here like, oh, now I know how to do this in Vim, now I know how to do that in Vim. I want you to walk out of here like understanding what the philosophy is, how it works, so that you can then spend time on your own learning to use this tool and saving yourself like thousands of keystrokes a day. Like, I cannot tell you how many keystrokes Vim saves me a day. There's no way to count it, it's immeasurable. So like the main philosophical point I want everyone to remember is that you spend way more time editing text than you spend producing text, right? So you'll type out a sentence or something, and you're going to spend way more time fixing that sentence, changing a word, adding a comma, or if it's a line of code, oh, I forgot to put the semicolon at the end, or something like that, right? So Vim is a modal editor, which means it has different modes, and that's where all the confusion comes in. The reason it has different modes is because you're expected to be spending more time editing your text than you are generating it. So quick, we don't have a lot of time to the Batmobile. I'm going to kind of give a demo here of all of the time-saving beauty of Vim. So here on the left, you can see I have Vim open. This is just some code I wrote in Python. On the right, I have it open in Kate, which is the KDE text editor. It's analogous to Notepad or anything else where you just type and text comes out. Now, typing and having text come out is pretty much as quick as it gets. You push the T, and a T appears on the screen. No problem. But I have all this code written, and if I want to make any changes to it, there's a couple things I want to do. So you can see on line 16, I'm defining this variable, which I have named in all capitals because I want you to think it's a constant, even though Python has no concept of constants, which annoys me. So anyway, I have this constant defined on line 16 on the right in Kate. And maybe I'm doing some refactor, and I don't need that line of code anymore. So there's a couple things I can do. The first thing I can do is turn on the thing that's going to show you what I'm typing. Here we go. All right, let's see. Yeah, there we go. OK, so I can hit the down arrow 16 times, but the title of this presentation is Typing Sucks, so I want to type a lot less. After I hit the down arrow 16 times, I can do this. And I hope I don't, oh crap, I overran it. That sucks. All right, so that kind of sucks too. If I'm really slick, I can shift and hit the end key, which on my laptop is a pain. I have to find the function key and then the end key. Now I've highlighted the line, and now I can hit the backspace. And that's pretty cool. But if I don't know all those cool hotkeys, the other thing I can do is use the mouse, which, by the way, if I think typing sucks, using the mouse is like the only thing that sucks worse. It's slow, right? Especially on a trackpad, right? I gotta move my mouse over, not highlight anything else, highlight this thing, hit the escape button, right? Take my hands off the keyboard, put my hands on the keyboard. It sucks. Vim is really beautiful. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to type 16 and then capital G, and that's going to take me to line 16. And then I'm going to hit DD, and the line goes away. That's it. So, okay, great. I got to remember all these hotkeys to delete a line. Well, what happens if I want to delete 5 lines, like all of this? Does anybody else think this sucks? You can do shift arrow. I can do shift arrow, or shift arrow. That doesn't work. Shift end, that does. And I can hold the shift key and I can go down a bunch. So 5 lines. That's cool. What if I want to delete 100 lines? What if I want to delete 97 lines? So Vim is really beautiful. I want to delete these 5 lines, the number 5 and DD. So all I've done is taken that action that I did before, which was DD, that deletes a line. And by prefixing it with a number, I've told Vim, I want you to do this 5 times. If I want to do it 125 times, it's just 125 DD. All right. Undo is U, and in that whole time, I never had to take my fingers off the home row of the keyboard. I didn't have to reach for the mouse. I didn't have to reach for the control key 60 times like they do if you use Emacs. So this is normal mode. Normal mode is when you type stuff in Vim and you're like, whoa, a bunch of stuff happened. What is going on? This is what's going on. There's a bunch of hotkeys programmed into normal mode because in normal mode, you're expected to be editing text. So the next thing we all learn about Vim is, okay, insert mode. I hit I, and I get into insert mode, and you can see down here at the bottom right, your Vim may or may not show you this depending on how it's configured, but it'll show me what mode I'm in, right? I can type some information, and then I hit the escape key, and I'm back to normal mode. Philosophically, in Vim, you're always in normal mode. I enter insert mode, I type something, I go back to normal mode because most of the time I'm editing text. To navigate around in Vim, you don't have to take your fingers off the home keys. This takes a little bit of time to kind of get used to what direction you're going to move in, but those H, J, K, and L keys will navigate you around like the arrow keys. So you don't have to leave the keyboard to a remote region of the keyboard, mess with the arrow keys, and come back. Okay, so I is a little bit more specific than it drops you into insert mode. I means I want you to insert characters before my cursor. So you can see, is the font big enough there for people to read? I can probably make it bigger. And I can also get rid of this because I think I'm done proving my point. Okay. Is that big enough for people to read? You can go bigger. Okay. So I means I want to insert a character before my cursor. All right. So if I hit I, it drops me into insert mode, and then whatever I type comes in before where my cursor was, which was over that capital O. Okay? If I type A, that's going to drop me into insert mode, but it's going to put characters after my cursor. Okay, so I puts me in insert mode, but puts things before my cursor, A after my cursor. That's cool, but then there's this pattern in Vim that you'll start to recognize as you start to work your way through the hotkeys, and that is a lowercase letter does something in normal mode, and an uppercase letter does that thing either like bigger or backwards. So in the case of I, which will put me in insert mode, it's going to put before my cursor. A capital I is going to drive me all the way back to the beginning of the line to put something that I forgot at the beginning of the line. So it does the same thing I does, which was put you in insert mode before your cursor, but it does it like bigger, all the way to the beginning of the line. Similarly, a capital A will take you all the way to the end of the line, and drop you into insert mode. If I want to delete characters, X will delete the character under my cursor, so that's the T, okay? But a capital X will delete the character before my cursor. So there's the pattern of it's doing the same thing, but just backwards. Instead of deleting the one under my cursor, it's the one before my cursor. Similarly, B will take me back a word. W will take me forward a word. W respects punctuation, but a capital W will skip over certain kinds of punctuation. How much time do I have?
You were at 8 minutes.
Oh, woo, I got tons of time. Okay. So I'll just talk about a few more commands, and then I'm going to show an example of something that saved me lots of time, and then I'm going to wrap it up. Okay, so a few things that are handy to know. Y is for yank, right? So it's like copy. You can think of it like copy. YY yanks a whole line, okay? And P will paste that whole line. So if I want to duplicate a line, right, I can yank it, and then I can paste it a bunch. If I know I need 5 of them, similarly to how we use DD, right, I can say 5P, and it will paste 5 of those lines. Okay, so that's all really cool. You can memorize all these hotkeys. And one of the things that lets you do is create Vim macros, which is super sweet. So if anybody's familiar with Java at all, you've seen this before. You have a class that has all these private variables, and the next thing that comes after your private variables are like setters and getters. And it's like kind of the same thing over and over again. They're pretty predictable. You can have IDEs that will like generate them out for you, but sort of ignoring that, this is a really good example of Vim macros. What Vim macros allow you to do is record what you did and then replay it, just kind of like all the rest of the macros in the computing world. But the value of this comes when I might have to type the same thing over and over and over again. So I have this private member called first name. It needs a, let's start with a getter. It needs a getter. I'm going to blow through a bunch of Vim features. Again, I'm not expecting like to share, like here's all the different Vim hotkeys. There are cheat sheets for that and other learning tools, and I'll put a slide up at the end with some cool links on it. I'll talk out what I'm doing as I'm doing it. Again, the point is like this is the philosophy. This is like how Vim is used. You know, go home and check out these hotkeys and try and make it part of your workflow and save yourself some typing. So what I'm going to do, O will open a new line and drop me into insert mode. And I'm going to type out my method. In this case, it's a string. I'm going to call it get first name. And then I'm going to return first name. Okay, but I don't want to have to type that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, like 9 total times, right? I really only want to type it once, and then I want to have everything get filled in for me. So if I hit the letter Q, Vim knows I want to record a macro, and then I need to give it some place to record that to, so I told it A. So it's going to record that into buffer A. There's a buffer for almost every key on the keyboard, at least every letter and number. So now everything I type is going to be recorded into this buffer A. 0 is going to take me to the beginning of the line. I want to move 2 words forward. I want to copy 2 words. I want to drop myself into insert mode on a new line. And I can start typing public. And then I want to paste those 2 words that I yanked. I'm going to go back. I'm going to say get. And then tilde will capitalize that letter for me, so I don't have to go hunting for which capital letter I want. A drives me to the end and drops me in insert mode, right? And I can finish my function. I'm going to paste those 2 words again. Sorry, I'm skipping some stuff just because, like I said, it's the singularity. You go into like a fugue state, or however you pronounce that, and like just text happens. Open a new line, close that up. There we go. Okay, so now, there we go. I can end my macro. And if I did that correctly, all I have to do is ampersand A, and you can see it created get last name for me, and ampersand A again, and you can see it created get street for me. And you can see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 left, so 6 ampersand A. And it's gone through and it's created all these getter methods, and I only had to type through it once. Took me a little extra work than just typing out, but if you have 8 or 10 or 50 of these things that need to be done, it's really nice to just figure out how to do it once and then say, go do that 49 times and fill out my code, fill out my text file, my config file, whatever it is you're working So that is kind of all I have prepared. I'll kind of put the last slide up here for the links. These will be posted later, but if you wanted to take any of these links down. Vim has a built-in Vim tutor. If you just type Vim tutor on the command line, it will take you through all the different hotkeys and all the different features and stuff. You know, a cheat sheet is super handy. When I was learning to use Vim, I printed one out real big and put it right on the wall in front of my computer, like at eye level, you know, right above the monitor. There's Vim Snake, which, like, if you remember that game Snake on all the Nokia phones. Yeah, well, it teaches you to use those HJ, K, and L keys to move around so that you don't have to go hunting for the arrow keys or, God forbid, the mouse. You know, and all sorts of other, like, fun Vim stuff in there. Yeah, so I know I vomited, like, a lot of Vim features all over you guys, but hopefully that was interesting. Yes?
Can you save out macros?
Yes, you can, off the top of my head, yes, you absolutely can. Actually, I had to do it once to edit a file. Whenever I edit a new user, they had to then, like, go in and edit a file to make a disk quota for them. So I, like, saved out a macro that would just, like, do that. Yeah.
Can you edit your saved macros?
Yes. Yeah. So your macro is just text in a buffer, right? Which that buffer can be loaded from a text file. Vim knows how to save these things. So yeah, you can go in and you can edit them. In fact, if you're gonna, like, build out a really big macro, a lot of times I will actually, like, write out my macro and then try and play it through Vim rather than, like, trying to have it record it while you do it. Because if it gets to be, like, any size and you screw up, then you have to, like, start over. Whereas if you, like, design your macro, especially if it's something you have to use over and over again, then it can be a lot easier to do that, you know, by designing that macro and then playing it rather than having it record what you're doing.
Can you macro your macros?
Yeah, so actually, all the time I'll do a macro to do something, and then I'll be like, oh, I need to do this, but I need to do something first and then do this thing. So I create a new macro that, like, does the first thing and then just invokes the second macro. Yeah, you can do that. If that was your question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else?
Sort of unrelated to Vim, what was the tool you were using to show what your keystrokes
Oh,
were?
it's called, what is it called? Come on, screen key,
Screen key.
which is exactly what it does.
I like it.
All right. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you, Mike.
Who's that? You're up.
I'll have a timer running for you too.
Okay.
Full-size HDMI or USB-C?
I have HDMI.
Perfect. I think it's hanging right off the edge of the table. Yeah, you want the password? Yeah. How about I send it to you in Slack?
That's fine.
All right. So I've only been to a couple of these meetings, and both times I ended up sitting next to somebody who was kind of new, starting in InfoSec, kind of didn't really know, like, where to start. I don't see those people here. So maybe it's not the best topic, but I hope you guys can get something out of it. Maybe if you like my talk, I can do a more technical topic later, either something with, like, Splunk for kind of tactical analysis, or maybe I'm pretty good with, like, Bro and using BroCut and that kind of stuff. So, but for this one, it's completely non-technical by design. Let's see. Got some notes here, so. All right. So the topic of my talk is not everyone can be a pen tester. And first a disclaimer. I don't hate pen testers, I promise. Actually, I think it's a great profession. My frustration with pen testers is that everybody I meet who's kind of young and trying to break into InfoSec, it's like, yeah, I want to be a pen tester. Well, not everybody can be a pen tester. In fact, there's a lot less pen tester jobs out there than all the other things that is necessary to keep our kind of industry working. There's a lot more blue team jobs out there than there are red team jobs. And, so I think you can find a lot of fulfillment in security without being a pen tester. I can say myself, I'm solidly in the blue team camp. So I just pulled this from, this is from CompTIA. It actually refers to CyberSeek. CyberSeek is a kind of an interesting organization. I'd take their data with a grain of salt just because, I mean, it's actually put together by CompTIA and yeah, and Burning Glass, which is the company that powers Glassdoor. Probably heard of them. So, you know, there's some inconsistencies. They don't actually exactly say how they determine that these are in-demand careers. So if you're asking these critical questions and you're doing a good job, you should probably be an analyst. So these are the salaries for the average. That's national average. Harrisburg area, greater Harrisburg is kind of like around 10, somewhere between 10 and 20 below the national average for kind of jobs in this immediate area. Obviously, if you get like a work from home job, then you're kind of competing with national. But so kind of take these and just drop it just a little bit if you want to, you know, if you're going to stay in the greater Harrisburg area and you need a job kind of on site. So cybersecurity engineer, cybersecurity analyst. My issue with these is that they're kind of catch-all. You definitely, if you get hired on as a cybersecurity analyst especially, you don't really know what you're going to be doing unless you've asked the hiring manager. So they kind of tend to be ambiguous jobs. Here's another kind of the same idea. So I pulled this from EC Council, so the people who do the CEH. So they actually give some numbers on how they got the top in demand, which don't quite match up. I would expect to see the higher numbers of open job postings at the top, but maybe they're doing some background calculation. Funny enough, ethical hacker is number one here. EC Council, I don't know. Maybe that's just coincidence. Also, number 4 and 5 just happen to have the exact same number of open job postings, so take it for what it is. But I mean, these are all really good careers, right? You can actually have a very fulfilling, kind of career in information security, with any of these. And I would say that, for salary's sake, you're a lot better off finding the job that you love, not worrying about the salary. I think anybody who works in InfoSec is going to make a decent salary, especially if you have enough experience. So do what you love, do it, kind of wakes you up in the morning and gets you going. So certifications. Do I need certifications? Short answer, no, but with an asterisk. It depends on what you're doing. So it can get you past some pre-screening, especially like the big organizations that have like a big kind of recruiting process and have their own website. And so they're doing kind of automated screening. So it can help you kind of hit those keywords they're looking for. It can also help you in salary negotiations. Typically, you're going to get more salary if you have a lot of certifications. It's not always the case, but I mean, there's a lot of other things you can do. So I list some things here. Create a blog, share ideas on social media, work your personal brand, maintaining a GitHub, either being a major contributor or actually creating your own project in GitHub is a great way to get your name out. Building a home lab, right? You can get all the knowledge from a security certification by building your home lab. participate in CTFs, even presenting at conferences or talks like local ones here is a good way to get your name out. So there are a couple jobs that actually do require certification, especially anything in federal space. They have actual requirements for certification. DoD especially, if you're doing any kind of DoD contract work. But those are going to be in the minority. So here's a couple kind of profiles of what I think are kind of interesting, high demand jobs, especially looking forward. Cloud security engineer, that's the new security engineer because everything's moving to the cloud. So, what are recruiters looking for? I mean, they're looking for people who have experience with their environment. So it's going to be very specific to the organization that you're applying to. So often, they're looking for a certification that meets exactly what their environment is. So that can kind of hurt you in some ways. They might see other certifications that are perfectly related, but they might not see that specific brand that they're looking for. So sometimes you won't even know what they're looking for, and based on the job posting. Main skills they're looking for: good troubleshooting skills, problem solving, especially like API and scripting abilities, being able to do integrations, that kind of stuff. Work from home is definitely an option for a lot of cloud security engineering jobs. You have the ability to specialize, which is actually kind of along the same idea as the cons here, is that, yeah, you specialize, hopefully you specialize in a product that's going to stick around for a while and actually have value. Although, people are still hiring for COBOL, so. SOC security analyst. So that's kind of my thing. I'm a SOC manager. So what are we looking for hiring? Kind of general broad security certifications, things like your GSEC, your Security Plus, your GCIH is really good. So anything that's kind of more broad, I'm looking for. The number one thing is just ability to think critically. I think that's hugely important. Asking the right questions, not trusting the information, and being able to kind of go through a validation process for the information that you're receiving. Pros, it's you get a lot of exposure to different things. You see all sorts of different facets of security. You're kind of the front line against threat actors, against kind of things that are on the horizon. So you kind of experience a lot of that stuff firsthand as a SOC analyst. Cons, it's information overload, high burnout rate. You're just constantly getting bombarded with alerts. Every once in a while you can breathe for a little bit, and then it's rinse and repeat. Especially at a larger SOC, you're going to be performing shift work. So basically your life has to revolve around your shift schedule. So that's, a lot of people don't really like that. I may not have time to go through all of these. So incident handler, that's a very high pressure role. Some of the skills that hiring managers are looking for is the ability to solve problems under duress. Having a wide breadth of skills, especially being able to ramp up quickly on new technologies, is really important. And also being able to communicate with at different levels with the technical people, but also with your board, your CEO, your CTO, just to be able to kind of keep them in the loop of what's going on. There's very little time to get bored, as an incident handler, or at least when you're kind of in the muck, as they call it. You're just, especially if you're kind of like me, with you just get bored with doing the same thing every day, then it kind of keeps you interested. But unpredictable hours, so you could end up basically handling an incident that starts at 3 a.m. and you could be working 16, 18-hour days for the next week, so you never really know. You could be stuck in a data center for long hours. Data centers are not known for their comfort, so and it's also very high risk too, because generally speaking, if you're called in to handle an incident, right, there's some major money at play in terms of valuable assets and that kind of stuff. And time is always your enemy. Security software developer. Now, there's kind of two different things that actually are kind of under the same umbrella. So you have people who develop software for security applications. You also have people who review existing software, looking for vulnerabilities and trying to kind of fix any code issues, input validation, that kind of stuff. They kind of often will kind of go under the same label. But it's more predictable work hours. You do end up specializing typically in a particular language or particular platform. But full-time coding is not for every person. I tried it for a little bit and not my thing. So you got to have a certain mindset and certain willingness to spend a long time sitting at a desk, looking over code and just kind of getting lost in your mind. So, or even worse, yeah, getting lost in other people's minds. Penetration tester, it's definitely a good job. It can be exciting at times. You typically have unconventional work hours, especially late nights doing kind of tending to your vulnerability scanning and that kind of stuff. Most pen testing engagements won't allow you to do scans during the day. I could be wrong, but at least for our clients that I've served, what?
They don't like it.
Yeah, right. So late nights, there's a lot of writing reports. People don't realize that it's actually probably the majority of the job is writing the reports on what you did and what you found and all the data to support everything that you've done. So a few myths in kind of the cyber job hunting, just from a hiring manager's perspective, is the job that is described in a posting is not the job being offered most of the time. So usually the people who are writing the job listings are not the people who are actually doing the hiring for the job. The job postings get recycled, and so oftentimes the recruiter is not the hiring manager, and so the recruiter doesn't really know what the hiring manager is hiring for. I can say that in my own experience, the job that brought me here was not at all the job I ended up getting. The job that I took reluctantly turned out to be a pretty awesome job, but it was not IT admin, which is basically what they're offering. So, and security analyst, security engineer, those are catch-alls. So just ask specifics about the jobs for sure. The contents of your resume matter. Well, there's kind of an asterisk because it does, but it doesn't. As a hiring manager, I'm only going to read maybe a quarter of your resume, if you're lucky. If I see things that I am kind of curious about, I might use that to ask you pointed questions. So make sure that the skills that you have on your resume are actually skills that you can talk to. If your resume is more than 2 pages, forget it. I'm only reading 25% of the first page. So, and the best security jobs are in DC, New York, San Francisco. Well, there's good jobs all around the country, especially in a lot of cities that you wouldn't think of normally. Atlanta, Tampa, Minneapolis, Denver. Some of these secondary cities are really growing. So, Harrisburg, yes. Yep. And was it? So. I did not do an introduction slide. I guess everybody else had an introduction slide. So my name is Stanley Hanke. I'm with Deloitte over in Mechanicsburg. And I'm a SOC manager, and I'll put my information on the slide when I submit it. So.
Very cool.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stanley.
No, I'm good now.
Brandon, are you sure you don't want to jump up here?
During the presentation. I'm ready.
See if this works. You have anything sensitive up there? What's that? You have anything sensitive up there? No. Okay, good.
screen content. Any idea?
Looks like you're extending.
Oh, how do I switch that?
Be able to pull up displays.
Single display?
Yep.
Let's try this.
Mirror. You want mirror?
Okay, we'll see.
There we go.
See that one? Hey, there we go. Yeah. All right. So I don't have a whole lot of slides, so hopefully I'll blow through these pretty quick, and I'm going to try to get to kind of a demo. So, intro slide, secure your IT like the DoD. By the way, I'm not going to stand up and walk around because I don't have cool hardware to click this, so I'm lazy. I'm just going to sit here and click it. No, because it'll take me 20 minutes to get it figured out. So caveat being, we're kind of going through like step one of like baseline security here. Nobody's going to leave here with the knowledge on how to hack the DoD. If you do, I'm awesome, and don't do it. So, like I said, yes, I will regret it. Don't do that. So, quick who I am, Floyd Rodery. I'm going to skip through all that sort of stuff, but kind of, like I said, spent a lot of years with what I call the alphabet agencies, jumping around to different ones. Some certifications that nobody cares about unless you're a hiring manager. Here's my wonderful disclaimer. I'm not going to read it. It basically says these views are my own. They do not reflect Department of Defense, United States government, or any other cool agencies that may show up on the slides. All right, so agenda. What is a STIG? Why should I use it? How do I use it? And hopefully we're going to do all this in 15 minutes. So I know there's like maybe 2 people here just from knowing personnel. Is anybody here familiar with STIGs? Is that just, okay, we got 3. Okay, cool, which is good. So first I'm going to go over what is a STIG. So the DoD likes acronyms. The STIG is a Secure Technical Information Guide. That sounds really cool. There's a big paragraph on what it is. But basically, it's a guide to implement technical security on a system, right? So it is not necessarily showing that you have the latest patches installed, right? So you're not at that level. It's not at like continuous monitoring or anything of that nature. This is literally like, hey, I got a shiny new object, whether that's a server, a laptop, a router, whatever the case may be. And that shiny new default comes with a whole lot of, I don't want to say misconfigurations, but configurations that are vulnerable for people who are kind of out in the network sniffing around. So like I said, this has nothing to do with patches, has nothing to do with any of that. This is literally taking, open the box on whatever it may be, and it's going to show you how to lock it down so that you have a secure baseline to start with. Why should I use it? Some good questions. So at a personal level, anybody who has a laptop here that's running Mac, running Windows, running Linux, anybody who has a desktop at home, anybody who has a home lab, you can use these DoD STIGs to actually secure your operating system, your application, your home lab, your home network, if you have a router, if you have this or that. So DISA has, 469 kit STIGs and counting. So if it's an operating system, if it's an application, if it's something that's online, can be plugged into a network, DISA probably has a STIG for it that you can go download for free. Like I said, none of the stuff that I'm going over is like DoD secrets, right? So it's all publicly available on the web. You don't need any cool credentials to get to it. Like I said, I'll give you the links. You can Google them as well. Super easy to find. So that's on the personal level. Like I said, you talked about red team, blue team. Obviously, if you're on the blue team, in the private sector, I'm not sure how they get into that sort of stuff. But like I said, if you're working at a corporation, you're responsible for web servers, you're responsible for servers, laptops, anything, right? So these are good guidelines to go off of to make sure that when you plug that laptop in or you power on that server or you fire up that instance of whatever it may be when it first gets on the network, you're starting with a good secure baseline on how to do that. Like I said, this is level 1, right? You're looking at adding additional things in there, patch management, continuous monitoring, Splunk, all sorts of things that you just keep piling on top, right? But this is kind of the base of where you want to start before you bring that asset online to make sure that you at least have a decent kind of foothold to work with. That was the blue team side. Red team side, thinking about it from the opposite aspect. you can go out to the DoD or DISA, you can download these STIGs. Let's say you want to, you're trying to, gain access to Active Directory, whether it's your own personal testing or whether it's a pen testing engagement, something like that. You can download the Active Directory STIG, and you can go through every single check and see exactly what they're changing in Active Directory to make sure it's secure. So you can kind of footprint an operating system or a router or device or whatever the case may be, and actually see what configurations they're recommending that you change to make it secure. So you can kind of learn from it from that aspect. Another way is just learning. Like I said, when I started, forever ago as a Linux sysadmin, day number one, the best way to learn about the Linux operating system was to sit down and go through this dreadful, hateful STIG, because I learned how the system worked. I learned how PAM worked. I learned, all sorts of things there that you don't necessarily get to because the STIGs are very much in the weeds. So I'll digress on that slide. But like I said, there's a lot of them there. So like I said, if you're responsible for something or you want to tinker with something, there's probably a guide there how to do it. So now that we know what they are, why we should use them, maybe use them, what do I need to get sticky with it? I did have like a little cool, like get jiggy with it thing here, but I thought that was kind of weird, but cool, so I didn't do it. Kind of wanted to. You need two things. So DISA produces a STIG viewer, which is what I'm going to demo here, as long as Mike doesn't yell at me. And then you need to download the STIG, right? So the STIG viewer, it's cross OS compatible, right? So if you're running Windows, they make an executable file to install it. If you're running Mac OS, I feel sorry for you. Or if you're running Linux, they make a jar file, which is you just make it executable and you can run it. So you can run it. Doesn't matter what your operating system is, you can still run the STIG viewer. STIG viewer is absolutely essential to using the STIG. So like I said, two things: grab the STIG viewer, and you go out to the URL. You search out of these 469, and they have a search bar. You can just type in Windows. You can see all the Windows STIGs, whatever. And I'll try to show that here real quick. And then you download the STIG. All right. So quick, watch my live demo. Don't worry, I got this with the hose, and Mike says we're good. Pretend that wasn't there. So this is the STIG viewer. Like I said, this is this was just a jar file that I downloaded. So quick orientation of the STIG viewer. Like I said, it's kind of tabbed. And you'll see as I actually populate things in here. So once you have the STIG viewer, kind of looks bland by itself. The first thing you need to do is go download a STIG. I've downloaded a couple of them ahead of time. These are just some examples of STIGs that I thought might be kind of popular that are already out there. Since Mike's here, we went with the Ubuntu 16.04 LTS STIG. If you're running ESXi, there's some STIGs there for the server side, for the virtual machine side. If you're running Windows 10 on your laptop at home or Windows 10 anywhere else, there's a Windows 10 STIG. There's a Windows Server 2019 STIG. There's a
Windows Server STIG is like 50% larger than the Ubuntu STIG.
I mean, there probably is. There probably is. Like I said, Windows Server 2019, there's 2016, and I'm not a Windows guy, but pick a generation of Windows, there's probably an applicable STIG. All right, so we figured out what we want to do. How do we do something with it? First thing you need to do is import a STIG. Since Mike is loud in the back, we're going to pick Ubuntu. I also happen to like Linux over Windows. Don't hate me. So we are going to open that STIG. You'll see here under we have STIG. It shows us the STIG that we have open. All right. A lot of this stuff, you're going to see a lot of DoD jargon and terms and things that are kind of just stupid, don't make sense. Trust me, that's the way the DoD works. So you just kind of have to go with it. Everything is organized by what they call vol ID, vulnerability ID, and then a rule name. So over here, some pertinent information is the severity. This is a Cat 1, which there's only 3 categories: Cat 1, Cat 2, and Cat 3. Cat 1 being the highest, the most critical thing that you need to address. You definitely don't want to put a system online if you have Cat 1s that you haven't answered and Cat 2s that you haven't answered and that sort of thing. So as you can see, this one only has 226 STIG checks. That's because it's Linux. If it was Windows, it'd be more. So here's an example of, like I said, a lot of this you just kind of have to breeze through and kind of, they give a rule title and a group title you don't really care about. Discussion, kind of just some content or background. The thing that you really care about is the check text. which says, hey, basically you need to, this is Cat 1, make sure you're running a vendor-supported version of whatever it may be. It gives you the command to run, in this case here, I'm not running Ubuntu, but so that command's not going to work. So you can kind of browse through these things. Like I said, each one of these are different. You can actually go, not on this one I can't. So if you found something that you actually want to use, what I would recommend doing is you go up to checklist and you say create checklist from the mark stig, which is basically the stig that I have open. So that's going to open up a new tab. So the cool thing that you have here is that, there we go. It kind of shows you Cat 1s, Cat 2s, Cat 3s. As I'm selecting these tabs, you can see the vulnerabilities here on the side are changing. So right now I'm basically have it organized by only showing me Cat 1s. I start there, thank you. Cat 2s, it's showing me all the Cat 2s, and then Cat 3s. Let's find one that maybe, all right, so this is a Cat 1. So kind of goes back to why should I use this, right? So by default, Ubuntu, and I'm not calling them out, SLES or anything else does the same thing. You can allow a blank or a null password. So you can create an account and allow a blank or a null password because of default PAM rules. So this says, and like I said, this is brand new out of the box without the stig. I would have never checked this. So this says here, go run this command. So you can see my laptop is obviously not secure because I found 2 entries in common password and common PC password, which is basically just a symlink to the same file. So what you can do is I can set up, here's your status. Everything by default is not reviewed. Let's say you're actually working through this. You want to make something secure. I can say, okay, I ran the command. I found that it's vulnerable, and I fixed it. Right, so I can make this not. I can check this box up here. This is not a finding. I can put my finding details in this box that says, and it tells you what to do to fix it. That's also what's nice about it. Remove any instance of null OK options and files under etc-pamd to prevent logins with empty passwords. So I can put finding details and comments in here that says, hey, I removed null OK and I logged out any existing users or whatever the case may be. And you can go through each one of these and kind of mark them. So the checklist gives you kind of just a list to work from to actually do this. So once you have all 200 and some done, you can export that out. You could send it to a manager who may care about it. You could send it to a blue team person who may care about it. You could send it to whoever. So it gives you some reporting options that says, yes, I ran a stig on this asset, and I answered all the critical category vulnerabilities, and someone give me the okay to power this thing on and go from there. So I won't bore you to death with anything else as far as going through these. Like I said, there's 469 stigs that you can download. You can download the Windows 10 stig and do the very same thing. You open a stig, you create a checklist from it, and you can go through the check and the fixed text all on your laptop. If you're running Windows 20 server at home, do the same thing. So like I said, on those 2 links I have somewhere. Let me get back here. Like I said, fast forward. All right, so yeah, that's where you download the stig viewer, and then you can download, when you go to that site there, it shows you all the stigs. You just search through them and download them from there. Yeah, I certainly can. I will also tell you that if you just do a Google search on disa-stig, it'll give you that. Because really, you only need to go to public.cyber.mil, and you can go through. It has little buttons that say download the stigs or buttons that say download the stig viewer, so you can kind of work your way from just public.cyber.mil. So I've got to be pretty close, but I don't want to bore you to death. I think that's kind of the meat and potatoes of what I was going over. So any questions at all from anybody?
I guess, is there a repository where people scripted the implementations of this, where it is?
Yeah, so I didn't get into that aspect of it because it's not something that you can do on your own, but so there's like SCAP content that you can do that'll automate all this stuff for you. The SCAP tools are not necessarily free from the DoD, so I didn't cover it, but yeah, so to answer your question, the stig is something that you might like do, not reference anything, you may do it like once a year. right? But you're going to run your SCAP content and all your other checks, more frequently than that. But like I said, the SCAP content basically pulls in all those checks from the STIG and automates it. You just need a SCAP tool to do that. Like I said, which is not free that I know of. Maybe somebody knows of a free SCAP tool, but yeah. So, and trust me, automating it is way nicer. Like I said, doing a manual STIG, if you do it properly, documenting everything, it's a good part of probably 20 hours to do. I mean, all depending on what you're doing it on, whatever the case may be. So that's it. Yes, Mike.
What's like the biggest, nastiest, most painful butt stick you ever had to do?
The biggest. Well, I've only ever done Linux STIGs, so I can't answer that because they've all been gravy.
Pick me.
Yeah, I'm not gonna pick you.
I have done a stig on 1,500 computers that you have to manually go to every single computer and type in the command line.
Yeah. Yes. But like I said, in getting into that, a lot of this stuff, even if you don't do SCAP, even if you don't have a SCAP tool, like you probably only have that if you're in an enterprise environment. If you're good at scripting and you want to mess around with stuff, you can certainly script a lot of these commands to check it and kind of roll your own sort of thing there. So, but yes, good one. Yeah.
What's the likelihood of running through these stigs might brick my device? Should I go ahead and do that on my production servers tomorrow morning?
Yes, always do this on production first. So.
There is a chance that you can do that with some computers.
So I'll caveat that by saying I've never bricked a device or an OS by doing this. I will tell you that when I've done it on applications because of requirements, the application certainly didn't function the way the customer thought it would after I put some changes in place. So it's always good to do it pre-prod if you can. But like I said, and there's a lot of stuff, and I'm not getting into POAMs and all this other gravy cool stuff, but to your question there, and that's a good one. So there's a lot of things that maybe are in a STIG or a good security practice that you just can't do because it's going to break Apache, it's going to break Oracle, whatever functionality the customer wants by you implementing that, it may break it. So somebody has to do a risk assessment and say, I'm okay with accepting the risk of not mitigating that. But like I said, so that's certainly something to keep in mind, that just because you stick it the whole way through, you may not be able to keep it in that configuration based off of business rules or customer requirements, or if you want your home lab to function the way you thought it should have. So yeah, very good question. Thank you. Anything else? Perfect. All right. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.
Did I chew up enough time for you? You did.
There we go. Do.
Maybe. Maybe.
Leave it to the last guy.
Anything?
I'm gonna say it worked for everybody else.
Are you?
It's a layer 8 issue.
Is it?
There it is.
There we go. So I just go into settings and it works.
Makes sense. You threatened.
I didn't make any changes. All right. My name's Brandon, for anyone who doesn't know who I am. And if you don't know who I am, meet me afterward. We'll talk. Today we're going to talk about IPv6. So who here knows what IPv6 is? I do. How many people are using IPv6?
Everybody.
You all might be, and you don't know it. And that's going to be what this conversation is.
If you had a STIG.
Right. So back in the golden days of the internet, during the internet boom, which ironically wasn't that long ago, we had this big problem with IPv4. As we know, there's only around 4 billion something IPv4 addresses. We're quickly running out. We have run out now, but thanks to NAT, or network address translation, we've sort of mitigated the issue, or more like we're ignoring the issue. We all know it's a big thing, but we're just gonna continue to ignore it. So back in the 90s, as early as 1994, we were talking about this issue. By 1998, I say created in 1998, but that's when they finally came to a consensus. IEEE said this is going to be the new IPv6 standard. In 1994, NAT was invented, network address translation. And by 1998, there were already plenty of tests implementing that to mitigate the IPv issue. But when IPv6 was invented, they didn't really think about NAT a whole lot. So when we invented IPv6, the idea was everybody gets an IP address. Every computer that's connected in an environment can have a public IP address. So we wanted to make a really long number, like this. But, you know, we made it a little easier because you can abbreviate all those zeros with, you know, that makes it so much easier to read. So this was the inherent problem, and still is the inherent problem with IPv6. It's become so complicated, it's difficult to use and implement. So the end result is most people don't, except when software does it by default for you. So you can check on your computer if you have an IPv6 address right now, do ipconfig or ifconfig, depending on your computer, and look, you probably have an IPv6 address. Look on your phone, you probably have an IPv6 address. And you're like, wait, if I have an IPv6 address and I'm not using it, then what's it being used for? Well, in most cases, it's not. But from a red teaming, pen testing perspective, it can be used, unfortunately. Because it's hard enough to figure out if someone's exfiltrating data over IPv4. But since some devices, like Windows 10, and your cell phones, by default, give you an IPv6 address, now you can exfiltrate data via IPv6. Isn't that great? Just another thing to worry about. So again, a lot of devices, you can check IPv6 is turned on by default. And as many of us know, DNS, domain name servers on our networks, we often have a DNS server for IPv4. Now I ask you, how many people have a DNS server for IPv6? Nobody. So as an attacker, we can make a DNS IPv6 server. And every time a Windows computer boots up, it'll send out a broadcast request over IPv6 saying, hey, is there an IPv6 DNS server I need to connect to? I want to know. So what this allows us to do is take advantage of some relaying. We can intercept that by pretending to be your handy-dandy IPv6 DNS server, and we can relay that communication to the domain controller. And if there's enough privileges on the machine, we can create our own potentially domain admin account. Great. And the best part is, since it's default on Windows, if you're running Windows Active Directory, how many people are doing that? Everybody. Pretty much, unless you're Ubuntu. Right. It'll work. Now, for my demo video, I had a really hard time getting this to work. But this great guy called Heath Adams did a really good demo and got his to work. So we're going to look at his demo. So first thing, we're going to turn that off because I'm going to talk. Sorry, Heath. So we're going to run Man in the Middle 6. This is a free piece of software you can get out on GitHub by some very dedicated hackers. So this is going to set up and automate this whole attack for us. And then we're going to use in packets net relay to relay the information. Over the LDAP-S communication. We're going to use LDAP secure because, you know, when we're communicating, we want to make sure we're secure. So we can see we're now we're sending spoofed replies. And there's our spoofed replies to the domain controller. And then what will happen is it will create an account for us, and then it will gather a whole bunch of information directly from the domain controller in a nice little HTML file, because we want to make it pretty. And then it will just dump all kinds of information for us, as well as, if it has enough permissions, create an account for us. So then we can go through and we potentially have all the users, Active Directory objects, whatever you could want. And we didn't do anything other than just potentially wait for a computer to restart or send a broadcast address. The best way for this is to wait for a computer to come back up. If someone restarts, which, there's this thing called Patch Tuesday that forces restarts. So it's a great time to be listening. But the idea is this attack is pretty reliable. It works well because right now those are the defaults. So how do you stop this? Turn off IPv6 internally, because do you need it? No. Are you using it? Probably not. Turn it off. The other thing you can do is you can monitor for the traffic. And there is a snort. If you're using that internally, there are rule sets that can look for this kind of traffic and stop it. And stay up to date on newer IPv6 methods. If we ever do migrate to IPv6, there's bound to continue to be new attack methods. This one right now, though, is pretty much one of the easiest, and no one's really looking at it. Because people say IPv6 and you run away, because who wants to deal with that? All right. And that's it. Any questions?
Simply, really clever.
Right.
So can you talk more about like the ramifications of setting up that DNS server? For those of us that don't use Active Directory all the time, what do we do?
Mine, we are just, in our pen testing practice, we just started doing more IPv6. So far, the understanding is there isn't really any ramifications if you don't have an IPv6 DNS server. The biggest ramification is you can steal a bunch of Active Directory stuff or mess with the domain server, but it doesn't actually cause any other issues. A lot of man-in-the-middle attacks will cause traffic to...
So you're standing up a fake domain server?
Yeah, a fake DNS server, and then we're just relaying the information. So we're... Yeah. Unlike IPv4 man-in-the-middle attacks, where you're using something like EtherCap or BetterCap, which is the recommended tool, that can cause traffic and fallout, right? Because you're communicating. In this case, it doesn't affect IPv4 traffic at all. And people monitoring IPv4 traffic will not notice because it's IPv6 traffic. And most network administrators, if they aren't familiar with IPv6, they won't even know what it is. They'll be like, this is the strangest Wireshark frame I've ever looked at. Again, that's why this is so clever, and it's not an area we're looking at. So tomorrow, go look at it and see. Because if you're not using IPv6, then just turn it off. Not quite sure how to turn it off on your phone, though. That's like a different thing. So you're
I think your phone uses it, though.
It probably does, so you're pretty much screwed there. And someone, when I was at B-Sides, Delaware, someone had made mention to that they utilized IPv6 to hop around cell phones and with Android and iOS hacking. I didn't know what they meant until I started looking into this. I was like, oh yeah, I guess it is turned on. And yeah, that's a great way, because IPv6 is encrypted by default, unlike IPv4. And hackers are notorious, then sometimes because we're lazy, why code more if you don't have to? We don't always encrypt things when we're taking things, and criminals don't either. But if you're doing it over IPv6, it's all encrypted, so that's great. Except it's not. And that's, yeah.
Can you put a link to the video on the
Yes, I can. And I'll make sure that link is with the slides. But as far as I know, no adverse impacts whatsoever. The only adverse impact I've had is I think it's written in Python 2. So that's, if I had one, great.
In the middle 6? I think it's Python 3.
Is it Python 3 now? I can't tell anymore. My environments are so messed up.
It didn't yell at me about being deprecated, like something.
Right.
Why
I
would
think
it?
there's something deprecated. But hey, it still works. And the best part about errors is you can ignore them. Many people do, with varying levels of success. I once had someone tell me when they ran out of gas once, they're like, well, I made it all the way with the warning light on, so I thought I could make it all the way back. And I often think that's like the logic that many businesses have. I've made it all this way and never gotten hacked, so I can probably make it another 10 years without having to do any security. All right, thank you guys.